Hi, I'm John Kursky. Atlas is taking a nap off camera, but in today's video, I want to show you how to verify your backups of semantic models using PQL.Assert. All right, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date on all the new features and content we'll be producing in the coming weeks. And with that, recently, we had a new version of PQL.Assert released in daxlib.org. And one of the things that it introduced was the ability to test perspectives. Now, this is important if you ever have to back up your Power BI files or you're using incremental refresh. This can be very helpful on knowing, are the partitions there that you expect when you restore the model. Now, diving into verified backups, this is something that until it becomes an issue, you never really think about. But let's say somebody accidentally deletes a semantic model, or you need to be able to reproduce what that semantic model looked like at the time to maybe pass an audit or at least verify this. We made the decision on this report, which is based off this semantic model. That was the data at the time. This is where backups become very important. Now, the issue you have is you have to set up backups, but you never really, till recently, know whether or not automatically, when you restore it, does it work? Now, for anyone who's done SQL management before and had to do database backups, you know verifying backups is important. That's no different from verifying your semantic model backups. So what I want to show you today is how you can do that with PQL.Assert, and then I'm going to share a notebook to help you get started. So up on my screen here, I have the PQL.Assert, that's version 0.50. This has the new partitions library within it for testing. And I am going to show you a workspace that is set up here. When I go to, let me see if I can zoom in. Oh, it's not doing my zoom in. All right, so let's make sure zoom is turned on. Okay. So I'm going to go to workspace settings. This is where my semantic model is located. And if I go to Azure Connections, I've already set up a storage account. Now, you're going to have to, if you're not working with portal.azure.com on the regular, or you don't have access to portal.azure.com as a subscription owner, you'll have to work with your IT department to get this set up. But you'll have to set up a storage account to be able to back up the semantic models, and there's going to get backed up into a storage account, and there's actually a link you can see up at the top there on how to do that. What this does is when you run backups, it's going to save a .abf file to the storage account, and that storage account needs to reside in the same region as your workspace. Now, you can identify that very quickly if you go to help and support and you go to aboutpowerbi.com. you can see where your home region is, and so that's where your storage account is going to need to be as well. That trips up folks if they've set this up before. Once you have that storage account set up, and I have this set up as an example, these are where the .abf files get stored. They actually, in a blob container, they'll show up in a Power BI.backup folder, and then you'll have the name of your workspace, and then within that workspace you have your ABF files. Now, I have that set up. That's a prereq to setting that up. The next thing I have set up is for my sample model. I'm going to open this up in the online editor. And if I go to editing here, and I go to edit view, I'm going to go to DAX query view. And I'm going to go to my model here, and the first thing I want to show you is if I do evaluate info.partitions. And let me roll up here. If I zoom in, you're going to see this is a info function that gives you information about the metadata of the partitions in your semantic model. Now, if you set up incremental refresh, you're going to see a lot of these Q named partitions. And so that is a representative of a portion of your data based on how you set up incremental refresh. Now, I am pulling in for this sample model data from SharePoint, and as new files come in, I'm just picking up the new files and adding it to the model. And so it makes it efficient by doing incremental because I'm not loading all the files from SharePoint. Now, the one thing you want to make sure, though, is that if I'm restoring this as part of my backup process, that the partitions that get restored are there, because you don't want any missing data. On the other hand, if you're not doing backups, and you just want to make sure that your partitions or your incremental refresh is set up correctly, you can use PQL.Assert to test to see, are those the right partitions? Do I have it set up correctly? Or if somebody changes incremental refresh, does it come out of line of how you need to be refreshing the model? So with the info.partitions function, that gives us insight into what partitions exist. Now I have set up, I've already loaded PQL.Assert 0.5 into this model, and I have a set of tests called with a BKUP suffix. And so if I click define and evaluate, you can see I've got a bunch of tests here. I'll scroll up to the top where you can check for the existence of a partition. You can check to see that there should be at least certain partitions that exist in the model. You can actually go and give date ranges to say, hey, when I restore this model, I should have partitions, X number of partitions between these date ranges, and so on and so forth. So you have a lot of flexibility on how you want to run your tests. And though when I run this, one note, when you do a define and evaluate, for some reason in DAX Query View, it wraps this in brackets. This is not something you put in when you set this up. You have to get rid of it, and then you get your table of values. It's already a table of data. I think there's some assumption that all UDF functions don't necessarily produce a table, which is fine, but in our case we do. And then I can see that all these partition tests pass. I don't necessarily need just partition tests. I can also have tests for to see, do I have rows? Are they hydrated? Maybe when you ran that backup, it was right before a refresh, or that refresh was not fully baked in. And you want to make sure, do I have data in here? Because if I'm taking a backup and I need to restore, there should be data in there. So I can run this as well. Again, it gives me that little arrow with the brackets. I'm going to get rid of that. Hit run. And then I can run those tests there. And so this is just pulling those pre-built PQL.Assert function UDF tests that I built, and I have this loaded in my model. And so the idea is that if I have these tests pre-built, anytime I restore the semantic model to another location, or even in the same workspace, I can run through the backup tests just to verify that the backup is working, because it's in the model, so it should be a part of the model. All right, so how do I do that? Well, if I go back to my workspace here, I have a notebook which I will share on Git, and feel free to make updates to it as you see fit. But this relies on, you'll notice up here, I've set up an environment. That's so that I can use Semantic Link Labs, which is a wonderful library. I will put a link in the description about Semantic Link Labs. Makes backing up and restoring your semantic models easier. And what this will do is I have it kind of set up for different operation modes. Now you could split this notebook into a backup notebook and a restore notebook, but for simplicity's sake, I combine that, and then depending on the operation you provide, it either does one, the other, or both. And then I can tell it where I want it to pull the data set or semantic model. I'll use those words interchangeably. And then it restores it, and then at the end, what it's going to do is run through the tests, specifically the backup tests, and then output whether or not those test results pass. Now, when I do this, one thing to keep in mind is I've set this up as a parameterized cell. So you could actually have like a pipeline run through this and then pass a bunch of different parameters so that if you're backing up multiple semantic models or data sets, again, I'll use that interchangeably, you can do that and not have to write a bunch of different notebooks doing the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and hit run all so that you can see this in action. And if I go back to the workspace real quick, you'll notice I don't, looks like it's restoring it now, but it's going to restore the model to sample model restored, and then it's going to run the tests. So right now, I think it's just spinning up. Once it spins up, it's going to do a configuration check, then it's going to back up the model. And you'll see here it's using the a backup method. Now, if I want to store information that's provided with secrets, I provided the capability that if you set up a key vault, you can do that too. This demo just is doing a straight backup, no key vault reliance. So as soon as this fires off, this should run through the configuration. I'll fast forward once it starts running. Okay, so it's running through now. It does the backup. It's backing up the model. You can see that it's performing the backup, and we'll check over on the portal.azure.com. So that's the model that got backed up. So if I go back here and hit refresh, you should see, yep, should have a new model that's been restored. And I'll even refresh this page just to double check. Blob containers, Power BI backup, workspace. All right, yep, so this is the new one that just got restored here. You'll see it has the .abf. And now it's done the backup, and now I've asked it to do the restore in the same workspace. You can update this notebook to not do that if you want to push it to another workspace. The other nice thing about putting it into another workspace is that it's going to really test out if the restore is working it appropriately, especially if you have RLS or OLS. You'll want to run the tests for RLS and OLS in that new workspace that maybe you're doing a restore on, just to make sure that that workspace is set up correctly as well. So it's going to run through the tests and puts out the test results. And it'll tell me which function it ran, including it ran the check and the partition test. Now, if there's a failure, the notebook will fail, and then it will actually show you where the failure is. Now, you could take this further and you could actually write this to an event house or write this back to OneLake to keep track of the test results, but I leave that up to you. I will share this in the YouTube description. But the nice thing about this is now when you run a backup, you can do that in a notebook, you can restore it, and then you can at least do some sanity checks to make sure that your backups are working. And when you restore it, both your workspace and the semantic model that you're restoring the semantic model to, or the workspace you're restoring the semantic model to, is in good shape. I hope you learned something today. We went over how to verify backups with PQL.Assert, the new version 0.50. And not only does this help you manage, using a notebook, manage your backups and your restores, but it also lets you double check if those semantic models are running or behaving appropriately based off your semantic model settings and your workspace settings. So if you've never done a backup before, I highly recommend trying to look at that, especially if you need to give yourself top cover in case somebody actually deletes a semantic model, or if you ever have had to answer the question, what decision did you make at that time? That backup of the ABF file is going to be really important to prove what the data was at the same time. Keep in mind that PBIP doesn't keep data, it just keeps schema. So unless you have the .abf file somewhere as a snapshot, you can't really prove that that was the data at the time of the report. All right. Well, in future videos, we'll get further into testing, more into AI. But until then,